Hey guys, subscribe for daily content. And if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks! What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review slash knife overview to show you guys. This is the Civivi Cetos or Cetos. I'm honestly not really sure exactly how to pronounce it, but there it is. Thanks so much to Civivi for sending this in for me to take a look at. Thanks so much to my generous patrons for supporting me, and please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. This is available right now. There's a few different versions of it, so if you don't like the all blacked out look, take a look at some of the other variants. I'll make sure that they are linked right down below in the description. It absolutely does help my channel when you use my link, so please do that. But it is absolutely up to you. Let's go ahead and get a measurement of the Cetos or Cetos. Overall length is coming in at, it's pretty big. It's full-size knife at about 8 inches. Blade length is coming in at exactly 3.5 inches, and your cutting edge is coming in at about over 3.25, 3.3, something like that. Let's go ahead and do just a few size comparisons up against the Ontario Rat Model 1 and the Ontario Rat Model 2. It's definitely a little bit shorter than the Rat 1 and way longer than the Rat 2. Let's do the Demco AD 20.5. I think that's probably a good one. How about the Benchmade Bug Out? I think that's also a good one. There we go. And last but not least, how about the Spyderco Para 3. All right, enough with the size comparisons. This is a weird knife. Why is it weird? Because it's a Civivi and it's a frame lock, but it's a steel frame lock, making it heavier than you would think. It's also kind of a narrow frame. The steel frame locks are odd to me. They are always in the budget world. Exposed frame locks on narrow frames are a bit odd to me. The action is okay when you're flipping it. The flipper tab is pretty low profile, and it's just a tiny little jimped nub. And it's got a pretty heavy detent. So it's not the most comfortable flip. Fortunately, there's a fuller that you can get at. I'm going to say this right now. This design, if it had to be a frame lock, would have been way better with a thumb stud. A thumb stud right here would have been, I think, better. We wouldn't have had to worry so much about where we were placing our fingers on the, at least with me, the amount of pressure that I apply to an exposed frame lock changes if I'm deploying with my thumb versus my index finger. The whole thing would have been better as a recessed liner lock, just like a lot of the stuff, or just a generic liner lock, just like most of the stuff they put out. So their choice to make it a steel frame lock is odd, but it works. It's okay. Outside of that, the actual, inside the pivot, it's about the same as other Civivis that I felt. It's just not the most enjoyable experience. The reverse flick works okay. That fuller, you can get at it if you want to. Carry profile up against the Spyderco Para 3. You can see here it's pretty thin, very thin, and contoured scale, so that's nice. Length and height up against the PM2 and Para 3. You can see here this guy is definitely not quite as long as the PM2, but it's a little bit longer, a little tiny bit longer than the Spyderco Para 3. It's pretty pill-shaped and pretty thin, so it shouldn't cause much of a problem outside of just the unexpected weight, right? I mean, it feels, I don't know how heavy it actually is. It might only weigh, I don't know, 3.75, maybe 4 ounces. Yeah, 3.88. So it's not horribly heavy. It's just heavier than you would expect for a Civivi knife like this, and it throws the balance off a little bit. The balance is actually back here. Yeah, so quite a ways from the pivot, which really throws you. These are pretty nitpicky details, but this is what happens when you do a steel frame lock, because steel is a lot heavier than not just titanium, but I mean, of course, than just doing the steel liner with whatever this, this is micarta. So had they done micarta and a steel liner lock, it would have been way lighter. Anyways, not that big of a deal. Still plenty pocket friendly. Let's go ahead and do a hardware check. Get out my tools as per usual. My tools are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can find them right down in the section of my description that talks about the tools I use on this channel. Seriously, check that out. There's lots of cool stuff down there. Stuff that I've been using for about 4 years now on this channel. It's all been great. Pivot is a T8. There's no lock bar insert screw because the whole thing is steel. The handle screws are all T8, so that's good. And then we have a couple of T6 screws for the pocket clip. So still minimal hardware. Should be very simple to take apart. No issues there. Blade stock thickness. I bet it's typical Civivi 110 to 115 thousandths or so. Yeah. Oh, did I almost nail it? 116, probably 115 thousandths. All right. Meat and potatoes time. This is, God, that flipper tab drives me nuts. This is a good looking knife. It's very, This is a very safe design. It's a very Civivi kind of like, we made another knife. It has a blade. It's spear point / drop point-esque. It has a big open handle with not too much in the way of insisting on where your hand should go other than between the flipper tab and this little butt end back here. You can get a full 4-finger grip on it, and as per usual, the whole thing is plenty comfortable except for this. I don't like that pocket clip. In fact, it's not that I don't like it. It's like, you know, Civivi does such a good job with everything else that pocket clip, which is truly kind of just a mediocre clip. It's not a bad clip, but it sticks out like a sore thumb because everything else that Civivi does is generally pretty good. So yeah, ergonomically, it's good outside of the pocket clip. That's about it. Edges, very nicely chamfered, no issue there. The micarta looks good. This almost looks like carbon fiber, but it is micarta. There is slight, no, you know what? I don't think they did. Yeah, it's exactly the same. Tiny little scallops on either side to get in there. So it's a little bit of a diagonal approach. It's okay. You're gonna find yourself kind of in a weird spot where you're trying to dodge that flipper tab, because if you hit the flipper tab, you're almost in a double clutch situation, and it's kind of narrow, kind of stiff, kind of not the friendliest thing to deploy. It's just, it's fine. Like, this would have been like, wow, in like 2014, right? 2013. It's okay. I'm coming down a little hard on it. You can also choke up a little bit, maybe with one knuckle. It's fairly comfortable in this position. So yeah, all very Civivi. What's the blade steel? 14C28N. Considering the price point, which we're going to talk about, that's fair. I like 14C28N, and Civivi seems to be doing a good job of it, at least, you know, when I'm considering like reports from the community. I don't think anybody's having any major issues with Civivi's 14C28N. At least I haven't heard that, so I'm going to assume it is heat treated correctly. If you don't know, I do not test every single blade on this channel in every conceivable circumstance. I don't take the time to, you know, resharpen it or sharpen it at various angles and give my thoughts versus the factory geometry. And I don't have my own Rockwell testing equipment. If I did that, you would be getting one upload a week versus 14. I really just kind of go off the design, and I depend on community feedback when it comes to, are there issues with the blade steel? Are there issues with the heat treatment? Which is part of the reason why, you know, you get the actual review so far out from when it actually releases. That way I have time to learn, like, hey, is there an issue with this? The people who are testing them. And, you know, if you are somebody who's looking for that type of testing, there are some other wonderful channels out there who do that type of extensive testing, and I would urge you to check them out. Me, I kind of like to just review the design itself. So I try to remind viewers periodically, that's what I do here. So I'm taking the opportunity in the middle of this video to remind people that is what I do. Anyways, it's got a black washed finish on the blade, which looks fine. It's whatever, it's Civivi, right? The fuller, and honestly, the swedge and the fuller, I mean, like the combo of that, it looks good. There's not anything just majorly different going on here, right? It's just kind of a bigger, longer, pointier version of some other knife that they've got in their line, but it's done well. Reasonably thin down at the edge, definitely pointy. This is definitely a knife that will stand up to, you know, generic knife use. There's a lanyard thing, and Civivi does this well. They just put a pin there, so it's totally out of the way of everything else, which literally every other part of the knife is more important than the lanyard hole. And I mean that. Literally every other part of any pocket knife is more important than the lanyard hole, right? So making a little bar back here and putting it completely out of the way of everything else back at the corner, completely out of sight, is a great way to do that. That's perfect. I love that. Pocket clip is in a good spot because we don't have to worry about a big stupid lanyard hole. It is actually recessed into the frame, so that's nice. It looks good, but there's no mounting position for lefties. So sorry, lefties. No dice there. We do have a nice smooth surface to push this big goose bill over. The goose bill will work fine. It's just, it's too pronounced, and then it's starting to go flat at the top. So this pocket clip works okay. It's fine. I just really wish they would change it, and I can't stop talking about it. The lockup. Where's the stop pin? Oh, the stop pin is actually, it's actually two lugs attached to the blade running on channels on the inside of the scales and frame. So that's nice. You get an additional point of contact versus the back of the blade resting on a single stop pin. So I do like that. There is no, let's go ahead and flip it like we normally would. No blade play up, down, left, or right. No lock stick. No pivot lash. It's a little tight, perhaps a bit too tight. Plenty strong detents, plenty. And the centering is dead on, so that's fine. What's the price in this guy? It's 63 bucks. That's about what I expected it to be. This is fine. It's okay. It's just like this knife is exceedingly boring for, you know, even for Civivi. Steel frame lock, you know, long, straight, sort of spear point blade with a big open, you know, runway for your hand. It's fine. If you just love this, if it just checks every box, then go after it. The price is fair. 14C28N, micarta, right? It's fine. And it's a good looking knife because it's not taking any aesthetic risks whatsoever. The whole thing would have been better as a recessed liner lock, and honestly, I think that if you're going to go this thin, in almost every design you have to do this, but if you're going to go this thin, you gotta cut this area out a little bit so that we can get in there a little bit easier. I don't know if it's because this is a frame lock and because the tension on that bar is so tight. A lot of people say, well, just bend it out. Well, just bend the frame lock out. Okay, let me tell you, that's actually something I want to talk about. When I complain about the tension on the lock bar and I say it's making it a little bit hard to disengage and a little hard to flip, and then you got people going, just bend it out. Don't do that. Don't. The truth of that is that some people, usually people who are experienced with doing that, might be successful with it. You might end up loosening the tension on the lock bar and making it slightly easier to disengage and slightly easier to flip while maintaining a secure lockout. However, considering how many people watch my channel and the percentage of people who are new to the knife world or new to any type of maintenance that's even remotely similar to that, we have a whole bunch of people now who feel like it's totally safe to bend out the lock bar, right? Resulting in a lot of cases, unsafe geometry, unsafe tension on that lock bar. So to those people who keep yelling that out, thinking that they're just solving a simple problem, oh my gosh, it's so simple. He needs my expert golden wisdom. Oh, shut up. Don't tell people to do that. That's not a good idea. I don't think it's a good idea for you to take this lock bar and bend it out and try and reduce the tension, right? You might get it to a point where it's bent too far and then you try to bend it back, and then what you're doing, because it's steel, is you're weakening this relief cut slowly, right? In some, you know what? Maybe it is the fact that let's say in the best case scenario, the vast majority of people who try that it ends up totally fine. And then a few people end up accidentally cutting their fingers because they bent it out too far, and the knife disengaged because of a now subpar lockup geometry and lock bar tension. It's still not worth it because we had some people who thought, oh, it's safe. Metal Complex told me, right? Or even I read in Metal Complex's comment section that it's totally fine to just bend the lock bar back out. Don't do that. If you're new, don't do that, right? It might work for some people, but it might also cause really unsafe lockup on your knife. There is no over travel on this thing. There's none, right? It'd be one thing if we had an over travel disc and then you could take the thing off and you could take it apart and then you could bend it and put it back, right? Be one thing, keep it from going any further, but still, you would still be able to move it far enough if it were, you know, unsafe lockup geometry. It still could potentially disengage because of improper tension, right? The geometry doesn't necessarily change, but we're moving it back. Like maybe the lockup is instead here, now it's here, and now it's going to be slippery, right? Don't do that. Don't do that. There is not infinite wisdom in the comments section. In fact, me, as the content creator, I am not providing infinite wisdom either, but I'm definitely not going to suggest to anybody that they alter the lock bar tension by bending it. Please do not listen to those people. That is not a good idea. If you feel like you have an issue with your knife, the best and safest thing to do is to contact the manufacturer and say, hey, I just bought this. I feel like it might be incorrect, and then let them handle it. That's the way to do it. This knife is okay. It's kind of boring. The price is fair. It'll function though. Like if you're wondering like, hey, Complex, aside from your rants and all of this crazy nonsense in this review, Will the knife function? Will it stand up to what I'm going to put it through? If what you're going to put it through is regular knife stuff, just like, you know, cutting cardboard, rope, wood, paper, rubber, stuff like that, and you're going to be applying downward pressure so that the material goes into the blade and not using it as a hammer, screwdriver, or pry bar, then yeah, the answer is yes. And I think it's $63 reasonably well spent. Just know that there is a massive plethora of options out there that make this look like such a silly choice. And Civivi themselves offer a lot of those things. I can think of maybe 20 things off the top of my head in Civivi's own line that I would suggest over this, and that's just Civivi. There are plenty of other brands like QSP, Kubi, Bastek, etc., 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 that also make excellent knives in this at this price point that are far more interesting and a little bit easier to manipulate, and just, I think, a better choice than a steel frame lock. I think steel frame locks alongside assisted opening is just, it's one of those things of the past, right? Or like, you know, like lockbacks. You know, they just kind of feel like it's just a kind of an unnecessary, it just creates an unnecessary inconvenience versus the choices we have nowadays. So anyways, sometimes people feel personally attacked, and I'm just saying that generically, right, about the lock bar thing. Don't feel personally attacked. I just think that that's very poor advice to give to, you know, people who might be reading that and be very new, because that's going to be the case, right? So, you know, don't feel personally attacked. Just generically saying that to everybody. Not a good idea to try and bend the lock bar out yourself and just expect everything to be okay. Because we all have varying levels of experience. So anyways, once again, this knife will absolutely be listed right down below. This is, in its base form, it is a cheap knife that I like. It's good enough for that. So it'll go in that playlist, my cheap knives I like playlist, which has there's a lot of good options, especially if you're new. It is not going to go in my most recommended knives playlist. I kind of reserve that for like knives that I think are truly exceptional. So I think that's pretty much where I'm going to leave it. That's going to be about it today. Thanks again to Civivi for sending this in. This will likely be something that I give away during a live stream. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like. So check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe, because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.